Welcome to the Southern Ohio Farm Show. I'm Brooke Beam. On this week's episode, Tammy Jones will be teaching us how to make deviled eggs with avocados, and Gigi Neal will be presenting part one of a two-part series on growing potatoes.
Welcome to the Southern Ohio Farm Show. This is Gigi Neal of OSU Extension in Claremont County, Agricultural and Natural Resources Educator.
I'm James Morris, the Agricultural and Natural Resources and Community Development Educator for the Ohio State University Extension in Brown County.
Hello, my name is Richard Purden. I'm with the Ohio State University Extension. I am the Ag and Natural Resource Educator for Adams County and the Community Development Educator for Adams County, Ohio.
And I'm Brooke Beam, the Ohio State University Extension Educator for Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Community Development in Highland County. And we will be your hosts for the Southern Ohio Farm Show.
Hi, I'm Tammy Jones with OSU Extension in Pike County. And today I wanted to talk to you about and show you a little bit about boiling hard-boiled eggs in preparation for possible deviled eggs for a side dish for maybe our Easter or springtime gathering. So when it comes to boiling eggs, the typical traditional way is on the stovetop. So filling your saucepan with water, boiling it, and then lowering your eggs in one at a time, depending on the size of the pot and the desired amount of eggs that you want to make, knowing that for each egg, you're going to get 2 halves for your deviled egg tray or dish. So you put those in there, you're going to boil them on high for about 5 minutes, reduce the heat to a low boil for another 10 minutes, and then allow them to cool. After they are cool, they'll be ready to take the shell off and create your egg. And there you will have your hard-boiled egg done on the stovetop method. A couple other methods I want to point out that you might be interested in trying. The microwave is another method that you could use to boil your eggs. So you're going to put your eggs into a microwave safe bowl. Depending on how many you would like to make in the size of your bowl, you're going to do anywhere from 2 to 6 at a time. You're going to cook them for 2 minutes for each egg that you have. So if I were going to do 3 eggs in this bowl, then that would be a cooking time of 6 minutes. So I'm going to put my 3 eggs in the bowl, cover them with water so that they are submerged at least a half an inch above the eggs. The water should cover them. Put them in for your 6 minutes. Allow them to cool for 3 to 4 minutes in the hot water in the microwave, and then remove them from that water and put them in some cold water. Again, once they are cooled down, you can peel them and then use them for your deviled eggs or other dish that you're using your hard-boiled egg for. So there's another option you might be interested in trying, and that is using your oven. So if you're using an oven, you would use your muffin tin, and you could put an egg in each muffin tin, or if you're only doing 6 eggs, you would just fill them in with 6 of them. You don't need cooking spray or anything with them. You're going to turn your oven and preheat it, get it ready at 350 degrees. Put your egg. You're going to bake for 30 minutes at the 350 degrees. And then once they come out, you're going to take them out and put them into a bowl of cold water to cool them down to be ready to peel. One thing about the oven method that I've found that is very normal is that you may see some kind of brown spots that may surface on the outside of the egg after you bake them. And then, which is normal, nothing wrong with that. But then when you peel them, you might see some dark spots actually on the egg itself inside the shell. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. I would not recommend the oven method if you wanted your eggs to look very nice for a presentation, such as a deviled egg tray. But if you were going to cook your hard-boiled eggs in a dish where you're going to be cutting it, maybe an egg salad or other type of salad, a mayonnaise-based salad that you are making, these would be perfectly fine because the coloring on them or the discoloring on them is not going to alarm anyone. Again, there's nothing wrong with it, but I just want you to be aware if you do use the oven method that you very likely will see this as I did on all of the ones that I did. And then one other method that you might try is the Instapot. You may have recently purchased or have a gift of an Instapot. So this is another way that you can do those eggs rather quickly with very little time. So what you're going to do with your Instapot, you're going to fill the bottom of it with 1 cup of water. And then you're probably in your Instapot, there's some type of basket or trivet down inside your pan. Mine has a basket that I set the eggs on. And whenever this little basket is placed down there, it has little legs on it. So when I sat it down, then the eggs are not actually touching the bottom of the surface. So these little legs that it stands on allowed me to position my eggs. I did 6 eggs in here, put them down in there. Again, there's 1 cup of water in there with it. Secure your lid. Once you get your device secured, then you are going to be sure to close your pressure valve. You're going to cook it on low pressure in your manual mode for 5 minutes. So using the buttons on the front of your Instapot, low pressure, 5 minutes, manual setting it. Once your 5 minutes is up, you're going to use the quick release. So on the top of your Instapot, you have a natural release and a quick release. So you're going to quick release the steam and the pressure from your pot. This doesn't take very long. And there's an indicator that is right beside that will pop down when it tells you it's depressurized. So if you've used your Instapot much or you haven't, be sure to read your manual and instructions on how to use the quick release so that you're safe whenever you're doing that pressure release. One other thing I want to recommend is that you do not put the electric pressure cooker underneath your cabinetry or anything that would be overhead, because when this comes off, when you release this, steam is going to go into the air and it's going to be very hot. Once that is done, you get that quick release, that steam off of it. Take those eggs out of there with lifting with that basket and place them in cold water until they are cool, and then they're ready to peel as well. So those are 4 different methods depending on the devices you have that you can use in the equipment and how much time you have in order to get your eggs ready. But they all would work for any recipe that called for a hard-boiled egg. So as I mentioned, deviled eggs are a very popular family side dish that you might be interested in either making this year or making for the very first time. So this year, I thought I would mix it up a little bit by taking my traditional deviled egg recipe, and I'm going to add something that I've not done in the past, and that is an avocado. So using the avocado, fresh avocado, and adding it to my deviled egg mixture is going to make the center green instead of the traditional yellow that we often see as part of deviled eggs. So this is a pretty simple recipe. I've already boiled my eggs. I've already peeled my eggs, so they are ready to go. Today, I used the microwave method for my eggs. They're peeled and ready to go. So in my dish for my recipe, it starts with a 1/2 cup of mayonnaise, of whatever type of mayonnaise you enjoy using that's your favorite. So a 1/2 cup of mayo added to the dish. Then I have lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of lemon juice that I'm adding. 1 tablespoon of yellow mustard. So it's a mustard mayo base, which is my favorite. And then I have 1/4 teaspoon of salt that I'm going to be adding, and 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper that I'm adding. And I'm going to mix those ingredients together, along with the yolk from the eggs that I've already cooked and hard boiled and taken the shell off of. When you go to do that, you're going to take your egg, you're going to cut it lengthwise in half. When you do that, that's going to slice your yolk in half. It's going to create, it even popped out for me. There's my yolk. So now I've got my egg ready to go. So I'm going to place it in my egg dish. Same thing with the other side, pop out that yolk. Fell out really easy there. So that tells me that they are good and cooked thoroughly. I'm going to go ahead and slice a couple of others here. Again, that yolk stuck there for me on my knife, which makes it easy to remove. And I'll do one more here to get started. Again, this is based on a recipe for a dozen eggs, but remember, if you're doing a dozen eggs, you're going to have 24 egg halves when you are done, or 24 servings, and a serving being 1/2 of an egg per serving. All right, so I'm adding in my yolk in with my mayonnaise, mustard, lemon, salt, pepper, and ingredients. And then lastly, I'm going to add in my chopped avocado. So I diced that up So you're going to use a whole avocado. And the avocado, when you purchase an avocado, if you're not going to use it right away, you're going to want to choose one that's very firm because it will ripen and you don't want it to become too overripe. This one actually ripened pretty perfectly for what I needed it to do, but I bought it 3 days ago. So when I bought it, it was very firm, but today it's easy. It mashes up very easy. If you have a food processor or you wanted to use a hand mixer, you could do that in case your avocado needed a little bit more power than just your arm stirring it up. So get that. It kind of just creates a kind of a cream filling, if you will, for the center of your eggs. And that avocado is going to give it an additional color that you probably haven't seen in the past for deviled eggs. So got that mixed up. I'm going to go ahead and fill them. So just going to spoon out of my mixture that I mixed up, which included the ingredients. I'm going to put it into the center of my egg halves. Let me get that done, and then I'll share with you what they're going to look like. So it's traditional deviled egg recipe, but just adding that avocado to give it that little bit of green tint. And adding a few other nutrients from the avocado that are good for us, in addition to the other ingredients that are already there. So let me share with you. Here are my avocado deviled eggs. As you can see, they kind of have a green tint to them, but only adding no food coloring or anything. That's just the avocado. This is a natural additive of the color. So I hope that you find this helpful, whether you are making just hard-boiled eggs or you're looking to create a side dish such as deviled eggs. And then maybe now you'll even consider making avocado deviled eggs.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Noble County's Farm Talk Breakfast. My name is Christine Gelly. I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Educator here. And I see that we have a lot of people joining us this morning that aren't from Noble County. So welcome virtually to Noble County. This is a program that we do once a month. We try to keep it on the third Friday of the month. Usually it's a breakfast meeting and keep it to a 1-hour event where we can talk about a current issue or trend or just share some general information that can be helpful for your home or your farm. And today's topic is Let's Talk Taters. All about potatoes today with my colleague, Gigi Neal. And Gigi has the same position as I do, but in Claremont County. So it's pretty special that we're able to welcome her from that part of the state here this morning, and none of us had to travel. Gigi, thank you for joining us this morning. I will hand it over to you to begin our presentation.
Well, thank you, Christine. And if I did have to travel, I probably would have left here about 4 o'clock this morning to get to you. So glad we didn't have to do that. But yeah, we're going to talk some potatoes today. And when she asked me to present this, I'm like, what in the world could I talk about on March 19th? I was like, oh, well, that's right after St. Patrick's Day. So that happens to be, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. This is kind of the rule of thumb to plant potatoes in Southern Ohio. And so then we're going to talk a little bit more about not only potatoes, but what types of potatoes can we use, and how do we do it, and why do we have to put them in the hills, and why do we have to just keep an eye out on them for other items that pop up throughout the year. So just a few things we're going to talk about today. And one of those is going to be the site selection of common kinds of potatoes. What is a seed potato versus a food potato? When is the best time to set those potatoes out? Where do I find seed potatoes and how do I set them? And can I use containers instead of a garden? This is a unique way to do it. And then the other one is there really a rainbow of potatoes? And then we're going to finish up with recipes. I did get up this morning and make my favorite recipe of potatoes, and we'll share those here in just a little bit. So site selection of common kinds of potatoes. Well, the very first thing you want to do, regardless of whether it's potatoes, flowers, vegetables of any kind, don't guess, soil test, please. So regardless of where you are in the state, contact your extension office And you can do that by going to whatever the county name is. So for example, for me, it will be claremont.osu.edu. For Noble County, it will be noble.osu.edu, and find that contact information, which if you're on this call today with us, this presentation, you have been in contact with your local extension office in some manner. So they can assist you in getting that soil sample and making sure that your soil has got the right nutrients, it has the appropriate pH level, and everything is going to be as best as possible to plant the crop that you want. So some examples are here on how to actually take a soil sample, whether it's with a soil probe or with a hand spade. And as you can tell in both of those, there are some organic matter items that are there. We don't want those organic items, so that upper grass layer or those bottom roots that are down in the hand spade, we don't want those to be present in our sample, because that will actually throw off the soil sample and cause it to have additional organic matter that it really doesn't have down in that 4 to 6, even 8-inch range where we are wanting our plant roots to grow. The next thing is we want to talk about is the site selection. We want to be sunny. So they do like to have full sun. You also want the soil to be loose, well drained, slightly acidic. And sorry, but my slightly acidic is hiding behind the sun today. Poorly drained causes a poor stand and low yields. And then also heavy soils cause small and rough tubers to grow. The other thing is finding well drained, slightly acidic soil, well drained soil. Do we have a lot of that in Southern Ohio? No, but we can find it. We can adapt it. In Noble County, you probably have about the same thing, because we're both on that Appalachian chain of hills, and you got to be able to adapt and adjust your soil as best as possible. So you might have to help loosen it up by adding some different products to help loosen that soil up. Some of the different types of potatoes that we eat, and these are the most common ones. Red skin potatoes, of course, they're good for pairing with meats and veggies. They're lower in starch. They do have a somewhat of a waxy texture, so they're good for best to boil. You can roast them. You can use them in salads, soups, and stews. So they're very versatile. They also do come in round, oblong, or oval, and I'm sure most of you have seen or even eaten these at potato salad and things like that. There is a European kind, and it has more of a yellow flesh, and it is a little nuttier in its flavor. White skin potatoes, they can be either high or low in starch. Now, if they're high in starch, they're going to probably be a little more mealy. So those are probably better for chipping and frying. Or if they're low, they're better for waxing and boiling, or even roasting. They are white flesh, but they can come in shades of yellow also. They are very versatile and one of the most popular kinds in North America. Now, russet, this is probably the ones that we use the most of. They are brown skin, they're oblong. These are the ones that we usually use for French fry, hash browns, those types of things, because they have a drier content. They are low in sugar, so they fry up easier. Now, another thing I should have mentioned earlier, reading an article yesterday coming through my extension email, we have what's called a safety net group down here. And so they put out all this information for food pantries, people in need throughout the community. One of the items that came through yesterday was 40,000 pounds. That's a lot of taters, if you really think about it. 40,000 pounds of potatoes are coming into our area, and they're trying to get them distributed into the different food pantries and shelters and places like that. So a local school, it helps to run this organization that brings these different items in. and they're putting them out into 50-pound bags, so out into the community. So there are going to be 40,000 pounds of red potatoes that are going to be out in the southwest corner, going out into the community. So that's a good thing that's happening. But think about it. That's a lot of potatoes coming in. So
Gigi, we have the same thing here too in Southeast Ohio. We have
Yeah.
a potato distribution coming out of Athens, and we will be bringing some into Noble County for our seed library that we'll be starting this spring too. So
Good deal.
really excellent opportunity.
And that's something we'll talk about here in a little bit, is the nutritional factor that comes from a potato. So they're better for us than what people think. So we'll come to that here in a little bit when we talk about nutrition. It goes along with it. So what's the difference? What's the difference between a seed potato and a food grade potato? Seed potatoes they're certified, they're small, they have been grown under certain conditions so that they can produce the roots, the tubers that come out of them that will eventually grow into being the plant. And copied and pasted something in there in the middle, didn't catch it, sorry. Food potatoes, the ones that we actually eat, the ones that we either grow in our gardens or we get in the grocery store, these have been grown from those certified seed potatoes. If we get them in the grocery store, a lot of times they have been treated with some sort of product that helps to keep the tubers from growing. So the eyes do not grow, and so they will not grow into those plant systems. Now, if you have them out in your home garden and you keep them in the house for a longer period of time, and I have even seen the grocery store versions do this too, but they are best not suited because even though those tubers do grow on them, they may not turn into a true plant or be that productive of a plant in the future as it's growing. So what is the best time to set those potatoes? Well, I kind of hinted at that at the very beginning. St. Patrick's Day. So we just had that the other day. So we are in the perfect time frame to be planting and setting our potatoes. Now, Ohio had anywhere from a zone 6 to a zone 5A. So here in Southern Ohio, where I am along the river, we're in a 6A. You guys are a little further north and east, even though you are considered Southwest, you're further north and east than I am. So you're probably closer to that 5 mark, maybe just the 6 mark, but we're all, I mean, either one of these USDA zones is, you can pretty much grow about anything into it. You just have to watch your frost line. So the rule of thumb on St. Patrick's Day is that the soil does need to be dry. And the other thing to think about is, when is your last frost? The last frost down here, another rule of thumb, is usually Mother's Day, so mid-May. So then we want to go back a couple weeks before our last frost, and then we can plant our potatoes. So we got anywhere from now, St. Patrick's Day, to probably the beginning, no later than the middle of April, to get a good crop of potatoes out. And the same thing for the further north you go in Ohio, we're looking more at that mid-April timeframe to be planting, or once again, 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost date. So we talked a little bit about the potatoes from the store. Potatoes are a no-no to use from the store. The ones that have been purchased or from our grocery stores, as I said, they're treated with an inhibitor so that the tubers do not grow. They don't really necessarily form a healthy plant in the future. So we want to make sure that we are getting our seed potatoes from a reputable company. So your local home and garden centers, your farm supply stores, you can order them and have them shipped directly to your place. But you want to make sure that you are getting a good quality, a good quantity of seed potatoes also. So when we talk about how in the world do we cut these, because we're not talking about getting potatoes like we go to the restaurant and we get this giant potato, baked potato, and we put all this butter and sour cream and everything on it. And it's like the size of a football. They're huge. Those are not the ones we're talking about. We're talking about potatoes that are probably anywhere from 3 to 5 ounces. So they're smaller in size, more the size of an orange or a baseball. And we're going to cut them down into smaller pieces. So we're talking about that size being 1.5 ounces, or roughly the size of a golf ball. That's why the golf ball picture's here. And we also want to make sure that there are 2 to 3 eyes, because the eyes that are on the potato are actually what the plant system is going to grow from and develop its roots and develop our plant from it. So here's an example of how we would cut that potato. So you can cut it in squares. You can cut it in 4 in cubes, and that will roughly give you your 1.5 ounces of a potato. When we do this, we want to make sure we're using a very sharp and clean knife. And when I say clean, we're using a 10% bleach solution that cleans that knife. It makes it sterile. And that way, when you make that cut, you're giving it a clean cut with a sterile knife, and also will help to sterilize the potato also a little bit. You do not want to use a serrated knife. Think about a serrated knife. It's got all those jagged edges on it. And when we cut through something, we're sawing with that. That's the whole purpose of it being serrated. And that leaves a lot of rough cuts. And the more nicks and notches that are in your potatoes, it's going to leave more room for disease to get in there. It's going to make it more susceptible to rot. It's also going to allow, I'm calling them bad bugs, so that bad bacteria to get into into the plant system. And so we want to make sure we're starting our plants off on the right foot. So we want to make sure that we are trying to use the best solution. We're preparing everything, because we do have to cut it. So we want to make sure we're cutting everything in the best manner, so that when we are planting them here in the near future, that they are going to have the best life. So we've started them off the best we can. Now, for a 100-foot row, and it's a lot of potatoes. That's a long row. Do we have to necessarily have them that long? No. But let's do the 100-foot row. You'll need about 15 pounds of seed potatoes. So remember, you're cutting those up into roughly a square. They don't have to be exact. You just want to make sure that you are getting 2 to 3 eyes as you are cutting up the potatoes. And so when you cut those 15 pounds up, that for each 100-foot row. And when you, well, I'm jumping ahead of myself here. So just, if you're only going to make a 10-foot row, then you're only going to need a few potatoes. So we're going to narrow that down. You only need 10-foot row, 2 potatoes, 3 pounds of roughly to get what you need. Once you have cut those potatoes and you have got them ready for seed, you don't have to plant them immediately. And it's probably better off to wait a couple days before you plant them. Or, when you are cutting them, cut them ahead of the time that you want to be cut, so that you're going to let them temper for a little bit. You want to keep them in an atmosphere for roughly 3 to 4 days in a dimly lit room. You want it to be have some humidity to it. So basically, room temperature is great, but you also want it to be dark. You want it to be able to put some thick skin on itself, and that is going to help prepare it. So we just made these flesh cuts, and so we want those flesh cuts to kind of harden and to put a skin on it, so that when we do put it in the soil, that it's not as easily susceptible to soil-borne illnesses or fungus or even rot. Be careful though, because as it is in the dark room for a couple days, you might get sprouts. Now, those sprouts are actually a good thing. So you want to be as gentle with those as possible because you don't want to accidentally break those little sprouts off. When you do plant them, though, make sure the sprouts are pointed up so that they can grow and push through the soil. So now we are going to get our site together. So earlier we talked about full sun and I mentioned well-drained soil. And so we got to find that first. And we just have to make sure that we are adapting our soils or finding that nice loose soil that we have. And a lot of times when we are growing them in our gardens, we have adapted our soil to make sure that we have that loose drain soil, whether it's putting in additional organic matter, whether it's adding in peat moss, adding different amendments in there to help adjust our soil, whether it's the pH level or whether it's to adapt it for the purpose of loosening it up. Poorly drained soils equals poor stands, and you're also going to get low yields. So it doesn't mean that you won't get potatoes. You're just going to not get as good of stand and growth out of them. And then the heavier soils that we have, a lot of times because those heavy soils are putting pressure on the plant as it's growing, doesn't allow the plant tuber to be able to expand and grow. And so then it's a little smaller and rough because they will grow to the size of their container. So even if their container is our earth and our earth is heavy and compacted some, then it's only going to grow to that size. So we are planting, and of course, this is a field of potatoes, not just a row. We want to make sure that they are planted in roughly 10 to 12 inch high hills. They are roughly 36 inches apart. And then once we've hilled them up 10 to 12 inches high, then we go back through and we kind of smash it down to make it so it's a 6 to 8 inch high hill. And soil to add as they grow. So we're going to talk about this here in just a second too. So here we have an example of diagram of actually hilling the plants up and keeping it 36 inches apart. So we want to hill our potatoes up, whether you have a tool that you can put behind your equipment that you can do this with, or you just go out in your garden and you use your hoe to help drag your row into a hill, roughly 10 to 12 inches high and 36 inches apart, because it needs to be able to the plant itself to have room to expand. We want to make sure that there's enough airflow because having plants spread out and having air run through it allows it to be less susceptible to disease and even insects, and then also to help pollinate too. Then once we have it 10 to 12 inches high, we are going to make it flat on top. So that's basically all you're doing is you're flattening it out, but you still want it to remain 6 to 8 inches high. So 10 to 12 inches wide, 6 to 8 inches high in the end. Now that does seem to be fairly wide and deep that we need to be working with. But we are growing potatoes and we don't just grow one potato from one plant. We're growing multiple potatoes from that root system. So once we have our hill made, then you're going to take the end of your shovel or your end of your hoe, the handle end, or maybe even a good sturdy stick, or down here in our neck of the woods, tobacco sticks. We still have those laying around, and you're going to drag roughly a trench on either side as it shows here. So a shallow trench on either side. Now that shallow trench on either side is going to be down closer to the root level. So you're going to take that down maybe 4 inches. And that's going to be where your fertilizer lays in. And a good example of a fertilizer to start your potatoes out with, because you want a good complete fertilizer, is a 10-20-10. So that's a good starter piece. Then you're going to, down the direct middle of your hilled area, you're going to drag another trench that's roughly 3 inches, because that's how deep you want to plant your potato, and then cover it. So plant your potato 3 inches deep, eyes shooting up. You want the eyes to the sun, and then you want to cover it also. And as I said, you're planting that seed potato about 3 inches down when your fertilizer on the sides. And then you're going to, of course, cover not only the seed potato, but also your fertilizer too. And then water everything in. The one thing or another thing to think about is that as it is in that hill, those tubers will dry out. So you want to make sure not only are you keeping that potato dry before we get started, but also we don't want it to be, when you plant it, to be too dry. So you want to make sure that you are watering it. So we've cut it, it's set there for 3 or 4 days, and it's dried out some. Now we've got it in the ground, and we want to make sure that it's got a good water source to it. So make sure that it has water and about a cup of fertilizer for each 30 feet of the row as the root system, or as the plant's growing. Plants should be 6 inches tall when this occurs, so you're giving it an extra dose of fertilizer as it is growing. So this is your side dressing, is what you're doing about when the plant is roughly 6 inches tall. And making sure that it stays, it has enough water supply to it. And a good rule of thumb with watering is, use the tool that you were given and stick your finger into the ground. If you feel moisture, it's good. If you need to add, you're going to know. And you want to make sure that you are just watering it in well as you get started, and then as it continues to grow. And of course, we have the good old Mother Nature that helps us out too. And sometimes a little too much is added at those periods of time, but there's nothing we can do about that. So those hills and the valleys that are there will hopefully help to run that off if we do get too much. And then as the plant is growing, so we've started the hill out 10 inches wide, 10 to 12 inches tall, and then we smashed it down so that we got that flat top on it. But we need to make sure we continue to add to the hill. So as the plant is growing, you're wanting to continue to drag with your hoe more soil up, because that is where the plant system is going to grow. And as the tubers, nodules come out and the potato is growing, the root system is growing up. So we've got the seed product, the seed potato in the ground, the plant is shooting up, but as it has shot up, and what we see above ground is green flourish, while below ground is going to be all these little root systems popping off. And then from those little root systems are going to be potatoes at the end. And so the bigger our plant is on top, most likely that's the more potatoes we have on the underground. And then we just need to make sure we keep hilling it up, because as the plant grows taller, that means there's more root systems coming out. So we want to make sure we keep that hill and adding to it as needed.
If you want to see more information about potato production, tune in next week for part 2 of Gigi Neal's presentation on potatoes. We hope you have a very happy Easter and a healthy and safe weekend, and we'll see you next week for another all-new episode of the Southern Ohio Farm Show.